Hey everyone, welcome to this video. In today's video, we're going to do cloth jump animations, and this is inspired by Microsoft. And I also want to thank you, Telina Graphics, for his awesome tutorials. And I didn't use this technique using fracture and cloth belts. I used relatively recent feature, mix in animation, which means that we can create keyframe animation and then mix in cloth simulation into it. So tutorial is completely free, so feel free to follow along. And if you want these files that you saw in the intro video, then you can download the whole project file with the textures as well. So we are going to start by creating a plane. Now the plane will be under 100 centimeters by 100. So I don't know why I did 1000. And width segments will be 20 and 20. I'm gonna hold Alt, rotate, zoom in. This is our first plane. We're gonna need a couple of those. Let's say we're gonna need 6. So I'm just gonna Control C and Control V. Now we have 6 planes. We're gonna separate them from each other. I'm gonna put them in a cloner. So I'm gonna add cloner into the scene and put all those planes into the cloner, which means just make them a child of that cloner. Now when I click on the cloner, those 6 planes, they are being distributed around here. I'm gonna switch to linear, and now you see cloner automatically separated those for us. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna enter the number of our plane. So 1, 2, 3, 6, and then we're gonna reduce the position Y to 1 centimeter. So we have those 6 planes. What we're gonna do next is apply plane effector to that cloner. So while highlighting the cloner, click on the plane effector, and this will get added to the effector tab. Here you can see that plane effector. So now we enter the plane effector, and it's affecting all of those planes by 100 centimeters. We're gonna go to fields and bring in step field layer. Now you can see they got separated equally. So this is something where we wanna be. The way we can control this better, we can go to contour on the bottom of that step field layer, change it to curve, and then maybe create some custom curve. By holding control, you can add points to this curve. You can change it, make it more random this way, and then also we can lift this whole thing up and we can make them all go up. The best thing about using plane effector, and thanks for that to Selena Graphics, because I never knew you can do this with step effector, and it's very easy then for us to just animate it with one slider. So we have a jump really just here, and we can go to those parameters. We can say the position on X could change, and if I would do that, it would do it in that step manner too. I find if we're gonna go to rotation and rotate those slightly and rotate them on B as well. So let's say -19, -12, like this. So it's tilted toward us, and then like this. We have suddenly rotation that goes from like this here, which is pretty good. Now we can think about how we then gonna animate. So it's cloth. So on that cloner, put it into cloth surface. Once we have it in a cloth surface, we can increase the thickness just so the sheets have some thickness. And we're gonna apply connect object to that as well. So in between that, I'll bring in connect object. So by holding Alt, selected cloner, I've just inserted in between them. So it will automatically become the parent of that cloner. And because we have connect object, we can turn off the welding, turn off the tolerance. And when we have that connect object, we are able to apply the vertex map. So if I would click on a vertex and put it on a cloth surface, we can now apply the vertex map to the whole thing. I'll bring in spherical field. I've tried multiple different fields, but I feel like spherical felt like the most natural way of doing it, obviously depending on the size of the whole animation. The reason why I'm applying vertex map, because we want to cloth animate just the corners of those sheets. The way we do that, we apply the cloth tag to that cloth surface. So now when we apply the cloth tag, we can bring in forces. And with forces, we're going to go for field force, and we change the velocity type to set absolute velocity. Strength will be 430, and we change field force to random field. So we're gonna apply the random field. I can turn off here the semaphore thingy and on the real field force. I don't need to see it in my viewport. If I go to that random field, I'm gonna change a couple parameters here. You can see the noise type is parallel, that is fine, but the absolute scale is 2000. So if I look at it now, if I play it, it's really big in that sense. So we can stretch it to 2000, and you see it's affecting the cloth differently, more like overall. So that's better. And we can increase the relative scales as well to 150 on the X, just so it gets stretched alongside the X-axis. We can't see that effect yet because we have our surface setting for the cloth tag still in the basic. So I'm just gonna change it to 0.11 thickness, and bendiness will be, let's do 100. So at this moment, it doesn't look like much. It actually looks pretty bad. But as soon as we use this mix-in animation, we can really start controlling our animation while having the benefits of the cloth tag. I'm gonna activate the mix-in animation with pins on the cloth tag. I'm gonna set it to about 60. The one important thing I forgot to do is to actually animate the strength of that effector. So we actually need to have some animation for this mix-in animation effect to work. So I'm gonna activate the strength. I'm gonna put it actually to 0. So that's gonna be our starting point. So I'm gonna put my slider into 0 frames and press this diamond for a keyframe. Now I have a keyframe for this initial position, and I move it to 50 frames, and I'm gonna change this to 100%. Confirm that keyframe, and then I move it back down to 100 frames and change it back to 0. So now when we look at the animation, we're starting to see that there's some slight movement, but also we see part of the animation. So it's about going into that cloth tag and dial in mixed-in animation that actually reveals a bit of that cloth movement while keeping the animation intact. And there is an option for map here, and we're going to use that. We're going to drag that vertex map here, and we'll see now the cloth is affected using the vertex map. But what we're going to do, we're just going to say, okay, influence, map scale only at 45, map scale will be at 45, and maybe influence at 65 influence on the whole animation. And now we see we're starting to get nice movement. But what you see, we're actually affecting the middle by that softness of the cloth tag, so that the middle gets actually squashed, and this is all staying rock solid. So what we need to do, we need to invert the spherical field, and we're just gonna go to the modifiers, and we select invert, and now we inverted that field. So instead of we affecting faulting, we just starting to affect those corners. As you can see, now I can go back to that influence parameter, and I can make it influence even more. So let's do 57, and let's have a look at that. Maybe too much. Now we can look into that spherical field. Maybe make this smaller. Now you can see that we have some kind of warbly animation there. But what I found really good and what more realistic, we set some animation speed just so the noise doesn't stay the same, but it keeps on randomizing. So we say animation speed to 67, and now we have noise animating through the cloth all the time. So this will create some additional movement that will help us to sell the effect of the jumping cloth. Now I'll create the camera, and we'll start focusing on how this is looking in actually a camera view. So I'll create the backdrop. If you don't have the icon here, you can just go Shift-C, and you can type in backdrop, press enter, and the backdrop will appear in your scene. You can position it the way just so it's nicely works with your scene. For me, it just kind of automatically works. That's pretty good. Now I can bring in camera. So I'll go to Redshift, cameras, standard, and position the camera in a way that I'll reset all the numbers, lift the camera a little bit up, push it back. And what I'll do with the camera, I'll go to object and change the focal length to 85. This will give me a little bit of narrow field of view. I'll lift it up, and I'll also take that backdrop a little bit down, just so I see only. Now we can still push the camera a little bit back. So I'll put the camera under this now and just go a little bit back. Now we have the cloth surface that's subdividing our planes as well. And what we can do additionally, put it into subdivision surface just to further create that soft effect on the edges. I'm going to show you the example, how it's looking. So we have that cloth, but if I turn off the subdivision surface, you'll see it's kind of a weird behavior on the edges. So if I subdivide it, it looks better, softer. Now we can get into the parameters of the cloth tag. Once we're happy with the animation, we can bake it in. But I will first check if this is exactly how I want it to look, because I can see some stuff that I don't necessarily want, like those little jagged lines. The way we could prevent it, we can change the influence, make it like 60. So I find the map scale at 51. It's just about right. We've got some artifacts there and there, but the way we can mitigate those artifacts, we can actually go to that random field, change that relative scale so back to 100, just so we don't get that horizontal noise effect. Nice. Now in the cloth tag, we can go to surface, or the thickness will be with thinner. Can lift the camera more high up, and I can go in the plane effector and switch it to like 130. What else can improve the animation is that we go to that animation, we'll see that keyframe and we'll make it more pronounced. So we're just gonna go and hold shift. This way we can control only one, and we're gonna make it more jumpy. We can drag this all the way to 125. Maybe slide this. Now we can look at that spherical field. Maybe a bit more expanded. And we'll look at also into that spherical field into remap. And we'll make it about 90%. Just so it's not 100% powerful. Can try even less. We can also take this spherical field a bit more up, just so we don't have that super pronounced spherical effect field. And when it goes down, nice. So this is just about where I like it to be. Now, the one thing that I didn't show you is the importance of caching the scene. So if you go to the cloth tag, you have the option to calculate cache. So if I clear cache scene, the tag will change back to normal. Like this is the way you see it. What happened to me was actually the flakes node kept on updating. What I have to do is actually cache the whole scene. That should help with the changing seeds of the actual flakes. The other thing I did to fix it was to set the flakes to UV, or you can set it to object, but I've set it to UV, and I also cache scene. So you press cache scene button. This will cache the whole scene. And now that it's cached, I can actually flick through frame by frame, and I can keep checking the clusters. For example, if I focus on this cluster here, that I see that there are two together, two above it, and I can go next frame to 57, and I can see there's two together, the two above it. Next frame is two together, two above it, two there. So it doesn't change anymore. So if you see the initial video, if you see certain moments, you're gonna see that the flakes node regenerating the positions of those flakes. So that's not desirable. So it's important to cache the scene just so we don't have every frame the regenerated flakes. Now for the texturing process, we can create a separate camera, we can actually log this one. This is our front view. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit back, just even more up, and I'll still have some nice space around it. That's pretty good. I'm gonna lock it just using the protection tag. So now I can't move this camera, and I'll create new one. Redshift object cameras, standard. And with this camera, I'm gonna switch to that camera actually. And with this camera, I'm gonna zoom in more closely on all our planes. I'm gonna turn on the IPR just so I can see the fabric and also bring in dome light. Now dome light will be great for the initial texturing. We can leave it at 1.1 and we can start applying material. So let's create the first material, which could be just the standard material with flakes on it, and we can apply it to the plane 1. So I think it was the one on the top, so it will go in reverse. We can change it to blue. What we can do as well is to actually go down here, and I'm going to start explore trending palettes. And let's have a look. I'm going to select this palette. Seems like this is all my colors lately. And I can simply highlight that. If you're on Windows, you can just print screen that area. I can go to Cinema and go actually into my picture viewer and press Ctrl V and bringing that in here. Just keep it on the side, and I can look and grab actually the blue one from here. Wow, that's pretty close match. I can call it plain and then copy that material again 5 times, just so we have 6 different materials, and we can start working on colorizing them first. So I have this one applied. Now the plain one, apply to plain one, open it, use the purple one. Now the plain 2, open it, apply it to plain 2, click on the material. I lost the picture viewer. So picture viewer, I can do this one. And plane 3, applying to plane 3, open it, do the orange. Plane 4, material to plane 5, just so we some reflective material. And this would be our basic. Now we can go to the plane 1 and apply by double clicking. If you are in the node editor, double clicking, and you can apply flakes node. A flakes node, it's great because we can straight away apply into the bump map, the out normal, and we can also apply, actually we can apply the flakes ID into the metalness, and then we can have a ramp, apply it to that flakes ID, and make these on the flakes node, make the scale smaller, and density have a bit less. We can change the ramp to more contrasty look. I'm gonna actually zoom in on this just so I see, and it's have a nice texture on that blue plane. Now the second material, we can open it up, show node editor, and this time we can bring in tile node. Tile node, it's great. We can apply it to the color, and we can click on a tile node, and there is a global scale. And if we make it the number smaller, we'll have a tighter look. We can change the squares to anything we want. Radial, maybe not that one. But we can go to triangles, we can go to brick. So let's do weave, and let's also make this number 0.05, so we've get that nice weave effect. And we'll look at those colors again from our picture viewer, and then maybe apply some of those just so we get that effect. We might want to use the purple color more. When we look at that, we can see that we have another nice texture just by using procedural nodes like flakes and tile node. If we want to have it even more pronounced, we can go to that material and have like a bump map, and this could be created through bump map node, and bring in the tile there and pump it into bump. So now you have a slight bump on that weave pattern. And now I can go into my third material, maybe zoom in closer on that. In this third material, I can use, if I go to texture and we can look, we have tiles, we have pavement, we have flakes. So let's use pavement this time. Can go out color and we can change that gradient from stone back to our color on the palette that we chose. And then we'll do the same, but then reduce slightly the saturation. And then the gap color, could we take it from here maybe? Okay, and now we look at that scale. So really small, 0.1. And if I make this larger, this could be even better. Maybe to just do it this way. If I remove the white one, it could work as well. Now you can start combining all these nodes into like flakes nodes and more white. Now this is more likely. Now for the orange one, we can leave it as it is. We can just open it up, bring in brick node and pipe it into bump input, pump it into bump map. And now we get that pattern. So we're not going to change anything about it. We're just going to change how those bricks will be scaled, just so we get that nice. So I highly recommend using those, and we can start shifting, can change the height of those bricks and change the width and get something more squarey looking. So if I look at it now, if I just move in closer, getting quite a nice. If I change the height variation, we can bring the half width shift and put them all together. So they are really just creating this nice scale pattern, maybe shift 0. And now it's just a squarey bump texture. For the yellow one, we can go to textures again. So we did the brick, we did the flakes, did the pavement, maybe pavement we didn't do. We did it. We did the tiles, but we can try a different one. If I do the bump, I'll run the tiles through the bump and you can see it's creating a nice bump effect. I can change the size of it, not this width. Actually, I can change the global scale and change this lines. And now I can go back to that camera we created earlier and we have a nice effect. And if you want these files that you saw in the intro video, then you can download the whole project file with the textures as well.